afternoon, everybody. My name is Suzette Cook. I am a community activist and organizer for Providence, and I would like to thank everyone for coming out. Tap Stadium. Oh, yeah. So I would like to thank everyone for coming out to our one of very many community meetings. And I'm going to begin to start this off with Megan so she can explain about a lot of the work in which that we've been doing here in the community. But just to start it off, about 4 months ago, I began to canvass the Providence side community in all districts, asking people about how they felt in terms of municipal court fines and fees, and how it impacted them in our community. And so in the course of that, I must have spoken to about close to almost 200 people. And all of the stories were primarily the same. So now we're going to, at this meeting, we are going to open it up for a further discussion to talk about a lot of the things in which that we can do as a community to make it better, so that maybe we can get some laws changed to be able to best help us and the people in our community. So with that being said, for the moment, I'm going to now hand it over to Megan.
Can everyone hear me if I speak from here? I can move if I need to, but... Oh, I don't think I need it.
Yeah, but for those that are recording, you're going to need it.
Okay. That's going to be wrong. Okay. I'm going to try to hold this at a distance that I can project my real voice, but also have the mic captured. So thank you very much, Suzette, for the introduction and for convening this meeting, and thanks to everyone for joining us today, and really looking forward to moving pretty quickly through the presentation part into discussion, because there's a lot of wisdom in this room, and I'm personally looking forward very much to hearing from all of you. So my goal here is to quickly recap the results of the research that Suzette mentioned, and then move us forward toward discussion. So this winter into spring, I had the privilege of working with Open Doors and the Fines and Fees Working Group and a number of other community stakeholders to do a series of surveys and focus groups with people who are directly impacted by municipal court fines and fees. And this came from a lot of national attention, a lot of national effort focused on the impact of municipal court fines and fees, particularly on communities of color and people experiencing homelessness and other people who are disproportionately impacted by structural forms of oppression, including and especially structural racism. And we surveyed a total of 317 people, as Suzette mentioned. She personally did a lot of those surveys, looking at how they experience court debt. And what we found is that the impact of court debt in people's lives is really endemic and really profound, and that municipal court debt specifically is interwoven with debt incurred from district courts, from superior courts, from the traffic tribunal. And so when we think about municipal court debt, it has to be within this broader framework. And at the same time, it provided us an opportunity to think about what we do specifically at the municipal level to address some of these concrete concerns that people raised during the course of the study. And so a couple of the key findings from the report is that 42% of those surveyed owe municipal court debt, and that a good number beyond that were unsure if they owe debt. And that was another finding in and of itself, is that people are also really unclear about what this looks like, where they owe, how much they owe, what they need to do to resolve their debt. And then specifically, one of the things we found is that 26% of people had had their driver's licenses suspended as a result of municipal court debt. And I want to highlight driver's license suspensions because it's one of the most concrete consequences of municipal court debt, and also one of the ones with the most profound and rippling consequences. So if you think about all the things that people rely on their cars for, I know I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but without a car, it's really hard to get to work. It's really hard to drive your family to daycare. It's really hard to pay the court get to manage family obligations, or they keep driving because they have to. And then they're at risk of further fines, they're at risk of arrest, they're at risk of having their car towed, and all of these workplace consequences. And so that finding reflects a lot of the national data that says that getting rid of driver's license suspensions is one of the most concrete things that we can do to address the inequitable impact of municipal court debt. The most common things that people were cited for were vehicle-related offenses, and they're pretty minor offenses. They're red light cameras, parking violations, school zone cameras, U-turns, those kinds of things. Low-level traffic offenses. And similarly, on the arrest side, the most common arrest is for municipal-level disorderly conduct, which in my experience is sort of a catch-all for a range of low-level behaviors that the police don't like, but can't necessarily charge someone with a street crime for. In talking with people in focus groups, we had a series of 4 focus groups this spring focused on people who have experienced homelessness, people who've had their licenses suspended, people who've experienced incarceration, and people who live in over-policed neighborhoods, so zip codes 02907, 02908, and 02909. And the big themes that came from those groups were quite cross-cutting across those different groups of folks. And the first one was that it felt like the system was stacked against you. It felt like you went into court at a fundamental disadvantage, and that disadvantage pervaded through your experience with the police, with the court, with the office involved, the DMV, and so forth. And that the process of municipal court proceedings was very focused on revenue generation. It wasn't focused on public safety. It wasn't focused on just retribution. It certainly wasn't focused on restoration. It was focused on generating city. Thirdly, that the laws weren't clear or equitably enforced. People talked about seeing states parking tickets toward the end of the month in certain South Providence neighborhoods. I've personally driven past Wiggins Village and seen just a line of parking tickets on the cars at the end of the month. Things like that. People being unsure, where is it legal to smoke downtown, where is it not legal to smoke downtown, feeling like it matters how I look when I'm smoking downtown. If I'm, wearing old jeans in a backpack, I'm probably going to get ticketed. If I'm wearing a business suit, I'm probably not. People being charged, again, with those minor moving violations, with overnight parking. And people also talk about the experience of going to court, how stressful it is to go to court, how embarrassing it is to feel like your privacy is being invaded, and in many cases that your story is literally being not only broadcast but syndicated via Cotton Providence. How hard it is to communicate with the court, and again to figure out if you owe money, to whom you owe money, how do I pay it? If I can't pay it, then what do I do? How do I ask for a payment plan? None of this is clear to people. That the debts that to incur quickly and compound, and that people are getting whacked again by these multiple courts, multiple systems. You're getting an initial fine, you're getting a late fine, you're getting court costs, you're getting a DMV reinstatement fee, you're getting a fine on your, you're having to pay a higher insurance premium, you're having to pay tow fee. All of these fines compound really quickly. And then again, that what happens in one court and one bureaucracy is intimately linked to what happens in the others. And then the group also had really concrete ideas about what we can do. And a few of those key ones are first and foremost to stop suspending driver's licenses for unpaid court debt. Again, that's reflected nationally, that's reflected locally, very clearly. Stop suspending driver's licenses for unpaid court debt. People clearly differentiated that from suspending driver's licenses for other reasons, which people thought were in fact valid, things like driving under the influence. People thought that is a valid reason to suspend someone's license, but suspending a license because someone owes money across the board people found fundamentally unjust. Also to reduce court debt, both across the board, reduce it, and also give people options about how to pay. So that means both implementing payment plans, graduated or income-based fines, also offering alternatives like community service, like allowing someone to complete an educational or training program in lieu of paying court money for that owed. one of the other themes that came out of the groups is that it feels like the people who are making these policies don't have any on-the-ground reality of what the core debt is, or what $50 or $100 means in the life of someone whose monthly income may well be $700 or $800. And then lastly, to pass a municipal ordinance that would directly address and codify these findings. And so for the sake of argument and argument alone, there's a draft of such an ordinance here. Just to be clear, this is a draft. This is something to put forward to start a conversation. This is not, ready to be locked and loaded necessarily. But it speaks specifically to a few of these points. First, it forgives old court debt prior to 2018. It stops the imposition of late fees. It creates that working room. It creates a mechanism for informing people about their right to have their debt reduced, and that debt would be reduced automatically if someone were on a means-tested benefit like SNAP, like Medicaid. And if someone is not on a means-tested benefit, it would create a clear protocol for them to request debt reduction from the court. And then this would apply both to people who already owe debt and going forward to people who would incur.
Please do.
And I'm happy to answer any specific questions now or at any point along the way. I also have a copy of the draft of the full report that I'm happy to pass around to people if anyone wants to review the annotated version. But again, really looking forward to moving forward toward conversation on all of this. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Like,
Yes. Introduce him.
What's your name?
Hi, my name is Brett Jacob. I use he, him pronouns. I am Director of Research and Development in the Office of Mayor Lorzo. Happy to be here and really thankful to Megan and Suzette for all the work they've done on this. I know Councilman Gonzalez, we've chatted a bit about this, and Councilman, you've been a leader on this issue. Conversation as well for this, so thank you for that. This report is really striking. As Megan said earlier, it sort of codifies and writes down what folks already know and have experienced. The concrete solutions that came out of this, where we go from here, are things that are of great interest to the city. So, for example, license suspensions. We know that in addition to municipal court debt, also state court debt plays a huge role in reasons why folks' licenses are suspended. And we know that driving on a suspended license or revoked license is the number one reason that folks in Providence are arrested. It is the number one reason it has been for the past few years. And again, this isn't for driving under influence. This isn't for any of the other reasons that folks have their licenses revoked. It's for unpaid court debt. So one thing that we're looking at right now with the Providence Police Department is sort of re-examining what that interaction looks like. Is there a question on the table? Is there an alternative rather than issuing somebody a citation or issuing a summons or physically arresting them for when they pull over and they're found to have a suspended license? There an alternative that can be offered. Particularly, can we help folks get their licenses restored? So that sort of leads into the second piece that the city is interested in exploring as well, is really interested in offering and supporting license restoration services. We know that those services are already offered by some great community partners, but how can we as a city continue to support the restoration of licenses? And then the third piece that will require significant partnership. All of these are going to require partnership, but one thing that will require additional partnership with the courts is right now one of the challenges that we found is there's not a lot of data that exists on folks' experience, or not folks' experience rather. There's not a lot of data that exists with municipal court fines. How many were paid? How many of those are late, have late fees attached to them? How many of them were sent to somebody that doesn't have a return address? Or there's just a dearth of or a gap in information. And part of that we've identified is just there's not a 21st century system that exists within municipal court, and certainly not with other things like solutions like, in DPW, for example, environmental citations or anything like that. So what we're looking at is figuring out how we can implement a 21st century interface that addresses what Nathan talked about and what so many folks have mentioned about really improving just how we interact with the court. So rather than having to go in person every time on a specific day, there's got to be another way that we can provide access to the court and also think about how we develop a system that does actually consider something to live today. So those are some of the things that we're working on a broader level. I just want to say thank you again to Megan and everyone who has worked so hard on codifying this and having a very good interaction.
Thank you, Brent.
So what I'd like to do now is to open the floor for those that have any other comments or questions or any ideas as to where do we go from here and pertaining to or dealing the court fines and fees.
Well, I guess the first step is to introduce this ordinance, right? So,
I'm sorry, introduce yourself, please.
thank you, Suzette.
And Megan, for both Suzette and Megan for your hard work on this, and Brett as well. I guess the first step is to figure out, is to review this proposed ordinance and introduce it. Because we actually started these conversations a while ago. In fact, when I first came on to council, these conversations started with the mayor, the police department, Councilwoman Brown was part of it, Councilwoman Miller, Councilwoman Anthony. And so one of the first actually pushes that I was really involved in was there was this ordinance that was passed around downtown. It was, what was it? It was the non-smoking in the area, the smoking ban. And Councilman Zuriger had put in something because there was a sunset clause. And it just sat there. So when I was elected, I literally had to email the chair of the ordinance committee. So I decided that I was going to email him every single week, and then every single day, and then harass the clerk so we can have a hearing. Because to enforce that sunset clause, because people were just getting arrested for being poor and not having anywhere to go. And just looking at the preliminary findings, and I look forward to reading the whole report, is some of these things, when you think about just common sense stuff, we know that if someone doesn't have a car, if they don't have a license, they can't drive their car, they're unable to go to work, so how do you expect them to pay these fees? And so there are things here that they just make people's lives more difficult. And so we can still hold folks accountable without imposing layers and layers of barriers on them that prevents them from ever moving forward. And I think what a lot of these fees does is exactly that. So in the suspending of license, I think that's one thing that we definitely have to stop doing. I don't see the point of that, because if someone's going to leave the state, they don't have to drive, they can get on the bus. So that is unnecessary, and it hurts, it has long-term adverse impact. And I think creating a working group that includes people hurt by the court is critical, and people from the community, because we also need to think about what are some proactive approaches, as well as some strategies to address the concerns right now. But this conversation also should not just happen one time. It should be continuous, because these things will always come up, and we see that in the community and people being pushed out. And remember when we went on the House of Hope right along? That was a while ago. And just thinking about these minor things that everyday folks with resources resources with a home or a license, or just enough money to get on the bus can address. There are a lot of people in the community who cannot, so it's just really important for us to, one, pass an ordinance that prevents this from happening, but also think about what are some initiatives or strategies that we can implement to better serve our marginalized communities.
Thank you so much. Anyone else?
I'll talk. I love this one.
For the record, state your name.
Hello, my name is Ricardo Rio. I'm the guy on the opposite side of the whole block because, you know, I've been incarcerated a lot of years, you know, but, you know, also the word that they're not acknowledging now is the word change. Because anybody can change. See, because where I'm going with this directly to the housing program. You understand? There shouldn't be a condominium in Providence. If they're doing their job up top, you understand? Because on November 3rd, they're not gonna come get me. See, I'm speaking for myself, you know, close to you, because I'm visually impaired. You know, I have glaucoma, and I'm a diabetic. And I'm not trying to be homeless. You understand? And congratulations to the House of Gold, to my people over here on the lot with Dia, to open doors and things like that. But you know, they're not getting enough money. They're not getting enough money. They're worried about a $15 or $20 pocket ticket. You know, and most of the tickets that they do get are probably in front of their own house. You know, they got too many no parking signs. You understand? Just like we're saying over here, they're reaching out for the minor things. Fix the minor things, and then they don't become big things. You know, give the small man a chance, or the small person. Because the other day, I went on the bus, it was 90 degrees, and the guy was asking for my bus pass. You know how terrible that is? You know, because they went from from a 5 year to 2 year pass now. They're breaking it down all the way across the board. I thought that was crazy for a person to be left outside in heat weather, you know, weather, you know, and couldn't get on the bus. You know, because, you know, I'm still fighting the problem with a couple parking tickets that happened in 1980. Last time I did my math, that's 40 years ago. You know? And come on, you know, like you said, you know, you guys are putting it out there real nice and things like that. But I'm fighting for the little guy. The guy that, you know, like Megan said, the person that makes only $700, $800 a month, your income. You understand? You know, because I can understand you saying, like, paying 30%. You understand? But it's okay, because I can still live off $800 if I'm paying 30% for rent. I got a chance. But, you know, paying full rent and things like that, you know, I don't have a chance. And how am I going to pay a pocket ticket if I can't even pay my rent? You know? It's all about survival. And I'm surprised that, you know, that you know, people are complaining all the time, but there's no show-ups. You got to show up to see what's going on in your area, you know, so we can have a kind of, and this don't even start here, you know. This all starts up there on Smith Street. It starts up there at the big building, because you have to stop passing all these other bills and look into the low-income buildings too, you know, bills too. Because, you know, I feel like, you know, I'm a dead man walking. When I walk across the street and walk into a car, when I, you know, all I'm looking for is a set of keys. You know, where I can pay my bills, reasonable bills, and you know, and come out. That's why I come out to these kind of places, because I'm like the lady on Bewitched. I'm like Mr. Krabs. I want to be nosy. I want to find out what's going on, you know, because the only way you're gonna know what's going on is showing up. And my hat goes up to my friend over there too, James Montero, because he's helping the public. You understand? He's putting people back into education and things like that. You know, that's where it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be out here where everybody has a chance. You know, it has a chance. I'm tired of the myths. They keep telling you one thing, and they're doing another. Because the little guys deserve to have a chance too, you know? Because it's no great feeling to wake up every day and don't know if your eyes are gonna be closed forever, you know? Because I look at it, you know, I got a lot of energy every day because there's always somebody out there worse off in a position than you. I'm just pulling for the little people and the people that's trying. I like all these organizations because, you know, they don't put enough into you guys where you could give the little guy a chance. You understand? Because everybody deserves a chance, you know? Because I came up through poverty. I'm 61 years old, and I lived in Providence for 61 years. So why ain't I entitled to a house? What? Because they're haunting me back on my past? Which isn't fair, you know? Because it's all about, like you said, as far as, you know, giving a person a chance to, like with the ticket things and like that. Why when the day that it happened, they didn't send you out to somebody? So when, you know, when you have time to pay it, you know, because with that situation, because I went back, like I said, about the 3 or 4 tickets that I had in 1980. When you don't show up to them courts, they double up. That's not fair. That's not fair. Because, you know, here I am, they want me to pay $700, $800 for 4 $15 tickets that doubled up. And if you don't show up, you get a warrant. Who does that? Absolutely. Thank you, Ms. Suzette. And it's my pleasure just giving you a little input on me and what's going on in the organization. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for sharing your own experience with this. And it highlights at least 2 particular pieces of the proposed ordinance. One, it forgives the debt from prior to 2018. Sounds like there's no carrying debt from the 80s. So
40 years.
Exactly. The first deal was we did rid of all that old stuff. And secondly, if you're on any kind of means tax benefit, SSI or SSDI, it would not put the signs down to 25% of whatever the sticker price is, or 5% of your income. So that it would make it remain that, you know, not just this huge, like if you're spending a lot of money on rent, your choice is either don't pay that and then have it stack up, or worse,
Can't
or
find a set of keys.
pay that and use your housing, you know, which
Yeah.
works even worse, you know, that it's like it's an absolute situation. It's not ideal.
Also, the other thing too, just thinking about, like there's no provisions
around like people's ages, just thinking about disability. So you just shared a couple of things where you would think that if this ticket is 40 years old, that they would just waive it. You have a disability. Your income only is, you have a fixed income. So all of those things you would think there would be some sort of structure or provision around these fees or these policies that would say, well, if someone falls under these circumstances, then we should take a different approach because it's not necessarily black and white, and perhaps consider waiving those fees so that the person can pay their just basic necessity bills.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I'm John Gonzalez. I'm a councilman for Ward 1. And I want to thank everyone who's here. And Ricky, thank you so much for sharing your story. We can't thank you enough. This is a huge issue. And Ricky, you hit the nail on the head. We don't need lip service. We don't need Band-Aid solutions. We need to figure out how we get these things done. And I want to commend my colleagues on the City Council. I want to commend the City Administration, Megan, Suzette, thank you so much for convening this. It's important that we're having these conversations and this dialogue because that's what's really going to push the ball forward on this. And hearing people's stories and how this impacts them directly is critically important in terms of how we get this kind of legislation passed. And I can say that, you know, the councilwoman and I, we serve on the east side. But that also means that our fellow council members who are responsible, the as the legislative branch of government, are also showing up, and they're also voting for these pieces of legislation that impact communities. And so, when we continue the conversation, one of the things that I would urge everyone to do is certainly reach out to your council person and tell them how important this is to you. And then also, when this happens, and when we put this forth before the city council, everyone in this room needs to show up. Because it's your stories that our colleagues need to hear. And the more they hear real human stories, the more we can get some of these policies done. When we look at the data more broadly, it's clear. There are communities of color who are disproportionately impacted based on the laws that were created. If you look at the speed cameras and where they're situated around the city of Providence, I would venture to say that they mostly exist in Black and brown communities. So this is a pervasive issue, and we have to think about this holistically. We have to think about this broadly, and this is a start. Certainly addressing this issue head on and providing people with the resources and changing the law so that this doesn't compound is a start, but we also have to look at the issues more broadly. So healthcare, for example, if you're someone who is spending your disposable income on just trying to survive, this is another layer to the councilwoman's point and to Rick's point that just inhibits your ability to move forward. And these are just very concrete ideas. We know it is a fact that communities of color are disproportionately impacted by policing, by the speed cameras that are in our city, and it's incumbent on us to, again, work together to make sure that we're passing policies that ultimately impact people in a positive way, and I think this is a start, and I hope that we continue to show up and ensure that we're passing laws that center our communities. So thank you all for being here. We can't thank you enough.
Thanks, Councilman. Brother Gary, founder of Black Lives Matter, Rhode Island. There's a history, right? We talk about perpetuating the courts, right? But it's targeted for Black and brown people for years. The prison system is loaded with the same case after cases, years after years of discrimination, oppression. Black and brown people have been oppressed for years. This is going back decades. And, you know, we talk like in the 60s, you know, Black and brown people didn't stop. You know, that history still remains, right? Because when they're connected with the court system, that's the biggest problem. It's that connection with having that label that you did time, history, courts, prison, and no one was talking about it. You know, I remember I had the same bill for like 30 years, almost 30 years ago, and, you know, that happened. You know, I got stopped, and when I got stopped, the cop asked me, this is 30 years ago. I'm like, 30 years? I don't even remember. Like, this is crazy. You know, I'm like, 30 years ago? I don't remember what I was doing 30 years ago. And they ended up arresting me. And that was like, it was like torture. Like, you know, hold me in the cell for like 11 hours, you know, for a ticket for $100-something. So that's, you know, I remember that those days. And when you don't have that type of education, it's a perpetual thing for Black and brown people not paying attention, that getting targeted. You know, it's all about the system making pressure, making laws on people, Black and brown, and that was part of the system of oppression. Yeah, that's it.
All right, well. just gonna talk. Just wanted to raise that up, that absolutely this stuff is, the impact of that is horrible across the board, and it is doubly, triply, exponentially more horrible for communities of color, and that showed in this study too, that people who are BIPOC were statistically significantly more likely to be arrested. 72% of people in the sample who identified as BIPOC had been arrested at some point in the city of Providence. Men and transgender and gender non-binary persons were arrested disproportionately. Pretty shockingly, 100% of people who identified as trans or non-binary reported having been arrested in Providence. And then arrests also disproportionately impacted other vulnerable groups, so people with disabilities, people who have histories of incarceration, people who have household incomes below $500 a month. So just underscoring that the inequities run fundamental and run deep.
I'm James. I'm survivor of mass incarceration, criminal justice system. I guess for me, I'm no stranger to court, as I'm and what I learned about this the other day, it's not municipal court fines and fees, other court fines and fees that are at the state, is that we are under the impression that this money is going to the court. We're paying because we have taken up the court's time. We have to pay for the court's clerks and all this stuff. But unbeknownst to us, this money is not even going to the court. Like in the other system, it goes to the General Assembly Fund, and they're the ones that determine what the fines are. So I kind of look at that as that's kind of like gangster, if you ask me. Right? These are fines for this, and we're going to pay for this, and this money's going to come back to us, so we can use it to fund what we want to fund in any way that we can fund it. So it's a way of bleeding us for money for issues that 9 times out of 10 don't even affect us. So I guess I'm kind of ignorant to the municipal court fines because I don't know who's imposing these, right? Who's the person that imposes these things, right? And then me because I have a lot of money right now, I have a bad driving habit. I do. I'm in a rush 90% of the time. It's a problem. But where's this money going? And then, not only where is it going, what's it being used for? Those are 3 questions. I was wondering if anybody can answer.
So I could say that the fees, the price of the fees are set at the state level.
And then you have, like parking tickets, like from the meters, those go into the city's, general fund. So that goes into the city. And so there's funding that comes directly into the city, but then in terms of like who sets what those fees are going to be, that's done at the state level. So what would have been interesting, though, and you're right, because when it goes into the general fund, it could go to anyone. It's the city's general fund, general revenue. But if there was a mechanism, and if we had a policy that would require that fee to that those funds that are coming directly from the municipal court, maybe to go into some sort of fund that can be reinvested into the community, that would make a lot of sense. And that, going back to Mr. Ricardo's point, a lot of these community-based organizations just don't have the resources to do things. Like I'm just Helen Newson, I had this conversation about my whole community center, and or the work that Gary's doing, or anyone, or the work that you've been doing in the community. A lot of times they don't have the money even to kick off, launch these initiatives, and if they're relying on grant funding, a lot of times during the grant funding, the procurement process would require them to be reimbursed. So they have to have the money up front, and then they have to wait to reimburse, to receive reimbursement. So the mayor and I actually just had a conversation about it in terms of investing the money and changing the procurement process so that those grants aren't given ahead of time, but there's a way for us to track to make sure that they're being spent appropriately, they're there's a budget, there's some support behind it, but the procurement process is also problematic. So going back to Megan's point, there's the system, right? The disenfranchisement, the lack of equity or the inequity in the system is deeply rooted, and it has also a domino effect. Because it's not just in municipal court, but it's also, well, where do this money land, or where does the money go once it's collected? Is it being invested? But if it is invested, well, how do these organizations have access to it? And a lot of times the organizations that even have access to any type of funding, whether it's grant, whether it's municipal funding, they have an infrastructure to be able to submit some sort of like proposal, right? Or having like an accountant or someone to track it. And some of these small organizations don't always have the infrastructure. So it's, again, going back to Mr. Ricardo's point, you can't just change one component and not the other, because it's a puzzle, right? So or an organism, right? So if we're gonna pass an ordinance and we address the municipal court fee, and then let's say we create a mechanism to invest in the community, but we also need to make sure that the community entities are able to easily to access it, and they have the tools and resources to do that.
And that's why it's important to look at it more holistically, because when you think about even like the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, we have an affordable
Housing crisis in the city. I mean, it's rampant everywhere. And there isn't really a clear mechanism to ensure that the funding is going directly into affordable housing, for example. When we're passing all these tax stabilization agreements, and that's a huge problem. Because if we are going to give tax breaks, for example, how are we ensuring that that money is going to be funneled directly back into the communities? And so one of the things that I want to mention here is we had purview over our municipality, which is Providence. And we've seen over the years that if we are willing to lead on an issue, you saw with the source of income ordinance, for example, then the state might follow. So with something like this, if we're able to get it passed, hopefully that puts, I don't want to say pressure on the General Assembly, but it would perk maybe the interest of folks who are working up at the General Assembly to make the necessary changes so that there is more cohesiveness amongst the largest municipality in the state of Rhode Island and the rest of the state. So sometimes it works well for us to set the charge and for them to follow, or for us to work in collaboration with our General Assembly to get some of these stuff done. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Oh, I just want to read one more place too. The Amos. Yes. The Amos House. They do a lot of good service, you know. And I'm so proud of them too. I almost forgot that. That's my favorite. The Amos House. Well, I give it to all the people in the state. You understand what I'm talking about? But I'm just trying to make my point valid, you know, of, you know, why should I be walking around, you know, and homeless, you understand, and visually impaired, you understand, and have diabetes, and don't have a set of keys to a house, you know, because I'm 61 years old. How many years do you really think that I have left? You know, I just want to enjoy myself, go home, sit in a rocking chair like a grandfather's supposed to do, and enjoy life. Because I, you know, whoops, oh, no, I don't need all that now, I can talk now. Get it?
They want you to make it recorded.
Oh, it's too late now, we already said what we said. Thank you again, no, I just want to put that out there because I appreciate these kind of meetings because Suzette doing a great job. See, because I have a personal number, she called me up to keep me on top of it.
This was one of the major black-led organizations in the state of Rhode Island back in the 60s and 70s. We had
80s and 90s.
80s and 90s. Okay, yes, 80s and 90s. We had the Urban League and we had OIC. But for some reason, these organizations were systemically defunded, right? And now what you have are not black-led organizations leading issues in the state of Rhode Island in regards to our population. Most of them are white-led organizations. And organizations such as Kobe had 100 initiatives, and we could barely get a dime for the work that we were doing. And I run an organization. I'll be honest, I'm pretty well funded. 90% of our funding does not come from Rhode Island. I have to run out of state to get this money, and I can barely pay a finance person. I can barely pay a grant writer because my budget is so consumed with the work that to pay these individuals would probably soak up most of the resources. So before it got to where I'm actually raising it for, it would be little to nothing. So I have to go to these larger organizations to run the books, and I think I'd have somebody that's willing to donate time writing grants. But the back office, the infrastructure, this cost in and of itself soaks up any amount of resources that we could possibly get. So we're just trying to do the work. So when we're talking about the fines, the fees, and all that stuff, most of that resource does not go to black-led organizations. They don't. They go to the larger organizations that are now servicing our population and making decisions in regards to, which is offensive to us. Because, I mean, we here. Like, we matter. We don't need people outside the province of Rhode Island to make decisions for our population. Like, we're trying to do it, but sometimes we don't feel supported.
Resources.
Nice.
That's that word, resources. And honestly, the people who are closest to the problems are closest to the solutions. That's all I have to say. But I just wanted to echo that. That was powerful.
Again, so just real briefly, I just wanted to allow, for those, I do appreciate the officials that have been here. But the invitation was sent to a lot of them. That shows for whatever reason that they could not be here, for those that did come but couldn't stay. But this here is so very important for our community. I appreciate for those that says, well, you know, Suzette, that no, this is a we program, because I wouldn't be here without James. James may not have been here without Kobe. Kobe wouldn't have been here without Gary. Gary may not have been here without Deb. Deb may not have been here without Elaine. Like, in one form or another, we're all interconnected. Regardless to whatever other private organizations that you have, the whole basis of me wanting to really do this, then thereafter, granted, it wasn't about the court fines and fees, but that was the tie that binded us all together. Because it started with that, but we won't end with that. So this, I would like to be one of very many meetings that we all come together to continue. It can't be that. Together, if not every month, at least every couple of months, to throw some ideas off each other so that we can become that family again. You know, like if you see that next door neighbor that has a messed up yard, well, why can't we come together as a community? Because you don't know, they could be blind, crippled and crazy, we don't know, but at the end of the day, don't call the city on them. Let's see as a community what we can do to help build our neighbor up. Let's get ourselves back to the place that we begin to love each other and not go against each other. Just because what I'm doing doesn't quite fit your narrative, don't mean that I don't show up. We should be showing up at all of our events together as one, and to stop going against each other. That's the thing that doesn't make sense. I'm here because I got, not only do I have 27 grandchildren, okay? Out of the 27 grandchildren that I have, 20 of them are young men that all have to grow up in this community. So from by me fighting to try to keep John Hope, to save John Hope, that is about our children. Because my child might be related to your son, so forth and so on, because we are all interconnected. So again, let this be one of many meetings in which that we all begin to build each other, uplift each other, empower each other, not only as constituents or whatever, but as a community. Granted, we have a lot of the nonprofits that are here, but I want to see who we're fighting for. That's the ones that we need to have behind us. And that's what I'm searching for. These same people, they want to complain about all the things that are wrong, but they don't want to come in here to try to come together to make it right. So that's what I'm fighting for, and I'll keep going until I take my last breath.
My name is Terry Wright, and I'm the housing organizer at DARE. And I just want to echo what James said, Black Lives Matter. Black lives do matter. You have racism, then you have systemic racism, which is the trickle down effect of racism. And it's not a white thing, it's not a black thing, it's a white and a black thing. And we are experiencing a public health crisis. And at the top of the list is the housing crisis, which is decades old. When do we stop building the production of homes? Because the world hasn't stopped growing. A housing affordability crisis and a housing stock crisis. Sounds like a natural disaster to me. Because that's what happens when something gets neglected over long periods of time. Housing around the world has been neglected on a wide scale, and homelessness has become a national crisis, laying bare during the pandemic. Where is Rhode Island's housing justice? People have absolutely no place to go and are sleeping in their cars and risk being told and given tickets for parking on the streets. And many are sleeping at bus stops and encampment lots. The shelters are full. Hotel vouchers are at their max. Redlining, gentrification, displacement at its best. Decades later, wreaking havoc in our communities. Wreaking havoc for any chance at economic recovery. We live in an economy where we can raise the minimum wage and not the living wage. And here's where, without a shadow of doubt, we can link insufficient housing to crime. We can link it to mental illness, repeat offenders, health issues, survival. The barriers to obtaining housing are the Public Housing Authority and property owners who implement their own screening to determine if an applicant merits housing. Are they good enough to be tenants with criminal records after they have served their time, after their sentence is over? Are they good enough to become tenants without good credit? Are they good enough to become tenants without credible resources? Are they good enough to re-enter the world? Do they bear the right skin color? Or whatever discriminatory vices are being used? This practice gives merit to landlords and our local authorities to continue to punish our communities in the exclusion of formerly incarcerated people from a successful re-entry into the very communities they once called home. Job security, housing insecurity, destabilizes the goals of the re-entry process. That's displacement, which is traumatic. It's a traumatic experience for many. Displacement causes trauma. Mental health and the link between housing and well-being. Housing is a health issue. Homelessness is a public health issue. So I just encourage everyone to tell a friend, to tell a friend, to tell a friend to make sure you vote, to fight for bills that open up avenues to increase housing supply of many kinds, which will bring back community strength and collaborative values. There are a lot of different things that have played plagued the village that we now call a community. It's past time to enact plans into action for decent, affordable housing for all. And with the raised voice, I say no justice, no peace. No housing, no peace either. Higher crime rates, environmental hazards, mental illness. We will become the city that never sleeps if we do not get the unhoused out of the streets and into a place they can simply call home. Housing is a human right, and we should all treat it as such. A housing affordability crisis and an available housing stock crisis. We have banned the box on job applications. Now let's ban the box on housing applications. And not leave the effects of yesterday to have an impact on family life. Young people whom landlords refuse to rent to without a cosign. Many age out of their parents' homes, group homes, and residential settings, leaving the future generation with a degraded environment of conflict, of violence, mental health challenges, which can present itself in adulthood. Infection, malnutrition, drugs. A cycle of poverty, crime, and imprisonment in our BIPOC and marginalized communities. Again, I said redlining, gentrification, displacement are still in existence. We need redevelopment of our low-income BIPOC communities that are suffering. So the next time I take the mic, I will have my stats and numbers with me of folks who have suffered harm and need healing, because even 1% is too many. When did we stop overlooking people? Thank you.
The rest of purpose. I live on the south side, I've been for years. And I did hit some of these things. I do have a way of solving things, but like we talk about housing. I'm on the bus quite often, and I notice most of the corporations and things are for people who've got tax breaks that from out of town, because the problem is giving people tax breaks. And even like coming down North Main Street, there are so many places over by this state house that are unoccupied. And I think these people spend all this money to build these things up down by the train station. I think 30% of that housing should go to people who are low income. You know, because that's not right. I mean, they got places that aren't even occupied. And we got people that are homeless that they have to get a Section 8 to try to find a place to live in. When these places are right down there, when if they're going to get a tax break from the city, and we do have a long record back when it came to jobs, people coming here to work. First Source, they were supposed to hire our people, and they were going to try to start business and whatnot here. But it hasn't been in effect because we have so many laws and breaks that we give these people that we can keep up with them. I can't keep up with everything that they say we're going to do. So you almost need a group of people, a business that keeps up with, even when it comes to checking people who have records. You're not supposed to do that. But who's checking it? Because we don't have people to check these people. So that would be one source. Like I said, I think that one thing we have to do is fit. Why are these spaces unoccupied? You know what I mean? Because these people are getting tax breaks, and they're not like us. These people have money when they come here. So they're still getting rich weren't able to come forward. And a lot of people, I know somebody's been intake for 3 years waiting to come forward. And you got these judges and these prosecutors that live with big time money. And why? So you got people who haven't been to court who should be released, especially within the 3 years. And even less, it's like there should be a time limit, okay, you've been here a year and a half, and so we'll let you out on your own good behavior or whatever, and when it's time, we'll get to you, like 5 years, but we'll get to you, you know, good, but you can't leave the state or whatever. So, okay, so that's one issue. But, what really, I know there's issues in prison, but once I read Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, the prison system is just a new slavery, absolutely. And we are still slaves in this country. That's why no housing, bad education, all of that based on this slavery system that people think like, oh, I went to college and I did this and that, but these other people, I don't understand why, because it's set up that way. So, like I said,
said Providence is
The worst state for black families.
not only that, it is the quickest state for manufacturing jobs leaving the country. And the economy is changing, and white flight is coming back to the cities. This is happening across the globe. And the governor had this data that 75% of the jobs that come to Rhode Island will require some sort of post-secondary education or certification training by 2025. So if you do not have that, and you live in the city, right, where all these jobs are coming, these new jobs, this new economy are coming, you're ass out, and you can't afford to live here. Because the people that are coming to take these jobs, they want to pay more money to live here. Actually, all the factories that used to be in this area, they're turning them into condos. And these type of jobs are actually leaving the city. They're going further and further out. Whereas us who live in the city, we can't get to that because we don't have public transportation there sometimes. Access to these jobs at certain times of the day, but you need to be there at 4 o'clock in the morning. You need to be at 5 o'clock in the morning. There's no bus that goes away at that time. So you can't get the job. And that is part of the problem. White flight is coming back to the cities. People cannot afford to live here because the places that are here, the jobs that are coming, like if I live in Boston, I work in Rhode Island. I live in Boston, if I live in Rhode Island, I'll pay you $1,500. I'll pay you $2,000. So there is a big skills gap. And then the problem with prison is most of these individuals coming home, we've been sitting there for like 10, 20 years. We don't even understand the technology to even apply for some of these jobs. We don't even make an attachment to a resume. So this is, when you talk about housing, when you talk about employment, when you talk about all this stuff, what you need to understand is there's a new economy happening here. And we are not anywhere close to it. And actually, we're not even. When there's a skills gap, there's a huge skills gap in regards to what's going on.
But we can fix
So, to your point about housing, I actually have an ordinance that I introduced a year ago, and literally had to like push with some help with my council colleagues, including Councilman Gonzalez, who's one of my co-sponsors, and it's a housing affordability ordinance. And what that ordinance would do, which is sitting in committee, so I need all of your help to get it out of committee. What it would do, it incentivizes, because what you said is, so it actually this idea came when they tried to build the big tower. And it was a spot zoning situation, but the other issue was the median income household for the city of Providence is about $40,000 per year, which I actually think is a little less. And so you have someone from New York who wants to build this luxury building where even if you included the east side in that data for the median income household, it's about $60,000. So we're not a rich city. But you have someone who wants to build a housing complex where the majority of Providence residents, low income, middle income, and also like middle class, couldn't even afford it. So what I did for that, which, some of my colleagues thought it was okay for the zoning, so they voted in favor of it, I voted against it. I tried to make a motion, I proposed a motion where he would, because I figured if I don't have the votes, I'm still gonna put it down, but I could still try to put it in a motion if we don't have the votes to shut it down, where he would have to allocate a certain percentage of the units to affordable housing, or pay in lieu of, where it would be a fund to housing. And so this was before the housing trust fund and everything. And that was written down by membership then. Yes. So fast forward, we passed the housing trust fund, but our housing crisis is so dire, because you're right, we have a low housing stock and then there's the affordability, but they go hand in hand because it's economics. It's supply and demand. So if the supply is low, the demand is high, the cost is going to be out of reach, right? Where the affordability will be out of reach. So the ordinance that I have is any developer who's developing housing, right, residential development, in order to qualify for a tax stabilization agreement, a TSA, that they would have to, there's different tiers. So their TSA would be based on what they're allocating towards affordable housing. And so it's broken out into tiers. And what that would do is, one, increase the housing stock, but also make it more accessible for housing and create mixed income communities. So, and we don't have to recreate the wheel, because you know who did West Elmwood Housing, and you talk about how you had to go out of state to get funds. Ms. Sharon Conlon Wells, she actually had to get a lot of her grant funding from out of state to support that. That's an inclusionary zoning development, where there are people who are paying full rent. I know someone who lives in there. She and her husband have 5 children. She's a young entrepreneur. She's starting a business. Her husband works in a group home. They live in a 2-bedroom, right? And they're subsidized. So there are people who are subsidized and people who are paying full rent. There are other communities and cities throughout the nation that's doing it. Philadelphia is doing it. Seattle, Washington is doing it. Portland, Oregon is doing it. All over the country. So that's a model that should be implemented in every single neighborhood. And in terms of like the job development, so we just passed, which I introduced a resolution to do a full assessment of FirstSource. Because the first time actually I heard about the issues with FirstSource was at a meeting with DARE. And folks at DARE were telling me, listen, we've applied multiple times to these jobs, no one calls us. And so I started talking to community members and then talked to some developers and people who are hiring. And they're saying, well, these people don't have skills. So, like you said, there's a skills gap. So what I propose is to do a full assessment. Look, we need someone to oversee FirstSource. We need oversight, which we passed a resolution for that. But we also need to have a job training component that's part of FirstSource. So then when these folks are like, well, these people don't have skills, well, we're like, oh, don't worry, what are the skills and training that this type of jobs require so that we can partner with organizations like the Genesis Center, like DARE, like John Hope Settlement, all these community-based organizations to do some job training initiatives so that these the community members, the residents, the city residents who are applying to FirstSource jobs are hired. Because that's the whole point, is to hire people from the community. So if you qualify for a TSA, you're getting this benefit so that you can reinvest into the community. So we need oversight, and we've already passed something. For oversight, we need affordability. And also just thinking about also like proactive like mentorship programs. So Mr. Kobe Dennis is here. So I've been following this program, the initiative that he started from Princess to Kings, right? Am I saying it right? Princess to Kings, right? So the first time I met these young men, they were on Brown's campus. So my full-time job, I work at the university. And I came out, I was like, all right, look at these little black brown boys. We go find out. We started talking to Mr. Kobe and learned about the program. And then I found out that Caleb Doolin, a professor, she's done assessments on the program. So that program, their outcomes are like over 90% like positive in terms of the student outcomes. So we also need to invest in these community-based programs. It does not have to be like the elected officials who are running. Elected officials should be advocating for investments into them. But the people who should be running these programs and leading these initiatives are the community-based organizations and the community leaders. Because they're the ones who are connected. And so I do hope that all of you can reach out and email, call, whatever you need to do to the finance chair and the finance committee so that they can hear the ordinance. I introduced it over a year ago. And I just got it finally. It came before the finance committee, but what I did ask for was a public hearing, because I want to make sure that we're hearing from the community about the housing need. And so what I urge you all to do is to reach out to the the city council president as well as the finance chair and the leadership so that we can get this through committee and pass in the fall, because the housing crisis will only continue to widen. And then we have a housing problem, but then there are folks who have been incarcerated, but they don't have anywhere to live, they don't have jobs, they can't qualify for first source, and again, it's just like domino effect, right? And the other thing we should think about too, which I've been thinking and talking to folks about, and I think we should pass some sort of legislation, is to incentivize organizations, businesses that hire formerly incarcerated people. Because there are places that are doing that. Because what I've also heard is, in talking with folks, is that they won't hire them because they've been incarcerated. So if there's a mechanism to incentivize, like do a job training component, and then if you hire someone who's been formerly incarcerated, and also there's some sort of tracking to see like the outcome, but we can pilot some sort of program like that, so that we're not seeing people who've been formerly incarcerated go back into prison, because that's what we need to prevent, isn't it?
I would suggest that everyone here who hasn't been show ourselves with the and the only reason that I show up today was because Neely on Facebook put it out there, and I was like, oh, that would be. So you can't expect people to be here if they don't know if there's something going on, because this all affects them. So I don't know how you're going to put the information out there, but there has to be a better way than me just happening to find it from someone, a friend of mine just happened to put it out there.
So I read it, and I never heard it. Okay, so everyone, before everyone
Thank you.
Before anyone takes off, I wanted, seriously, gentlemen, like before you guys go, I wanted to know if in fact that I could get a commitment to possibly come together again, be it a month from now, or we can call individually, we can leave your number, and we can set up a time where we can come together and do this again. Okay? All right. Thank you, thank you. All right, so I guess because everyone looks like they're about to scatter. Is there the one last quick thing? If I could just get y'all's attention for a moment, because it's not over. Rick Leo, if I could just get y'all's attention for just one moment. There is one more key thing that I would like for us to think about, and that is that what are we going to be doing for our youth for this coming summer? And how many men that we have now and or that you know that would be willing to commit to do some type of mentorship programs for either the females and or the males? For our council, I'm also looking to ask you if you know what type of money or finances has been already put into the community via John Hope or, well, right now my fixation is here, okay, to add additional programs for the youth so that they're not out here scattered amongst our community.
Yeah, we can.
I'm asking.
We can get you that stuff.
Okay?
Yeah, go. I don't need the.
No, but I want to just be able to hear.
No, we can get you that.
Yeah, we can get the funding, okay?
Well, we can get you all the information.
Or the information. Okay, all right. Well, then